What we're going to discuss today is how to draw ellipses, and we first have to deal with finding our circle within our square that is really part of our visual language that we discussed earlier. It's part of our opening exercise, and it's important that we visualize where these lines go. Now, obviously now we need to divide this. We're always going through our endpoint. Now each time we of course have more information in terms of cues, but this is like speeding up once you get to the finish line. And it's important to do that. This is all about visual acuity and hand-eye coordination. Now these are the critical lines here, or actually we're going to use those for another marking to determine our, and you can do very, very elaborate mechanical drawings for these ellipses, but this gives you the information you need to know, because what I want is this halfway point, and I want this halfway point, and I want this halfway point, and I want this halfway point. Now, if I hit all these points, I should a circle make. But remember that we are bouncing a little bit here. So remember that this is all segmented. We're dealing with tessellations here of, there are 360 degrees in this circle, so if you do this 360 times, you're going to have a very accurate circle. But what this gives you now is a way to simulate this curvature of this arc. You go behind that dot, go behind this dot, go behind this dot, so each segment is accounted for. And you have a relatively accurate circle. Now, how does that play into our ellipse? Well, very simply, you're now changing this you're putting this element into perspective. And you check this angle here. See how accurate you are, because those should be the same. But here again, we're finding our diagonals. I missed a little there. We're finding our diagonals here. And we're visualizing all the way through this area, finding our center line, finding our centers here, and going all the way through this line to that line. And here is our diamond shape, now in perspective. So now we want that halfway point. We want this halfway point. A little bit more accurate. That halfway point. We want this halfway point. In other words, these two segments need to be equal. And this halfway point. Now, once again, we could segment this, but we can also just now roll our arc into this, knowing the principle behind it. Now this has to go behind this point, so it's important that we arc this so that it's going behind this point and starting to turn and go beyond that point. And you can segment this up much like we do our original design, but there is, for all practical purposes, an ellipse that we can work with as an artist, just guesstimating, visually guesstimating these center points. So let's do another one, just so we know what's going on here. This one we won't do quite as severe of a perspective. Again, we kind of visualize that, but it's close enough for government work. And yes, I do this relatively smoothly, he says as he misses. So it's important really not to talk while you're drawing the line, so that your breathing is consistent. Here again, we're going to put our diamond shape in here. Going outside of the lines actually just a tad. There's a reason for this, because your ellipse has to clear this. It's going behind it and coming forward. So now I'm finding, once again, my approximate, and as we get better at this, the approximations become clearer. It now becomes that arc going behind there, this arc going behind there, this arc comes around now. So there you have mechanical ellipses. We're going to show you some you really don't draw this very much to this precision. In practice, you would draw one side of this on tracing paper, and then you would shade it in on the back, flip it over, and draw it again so it would be identical on both sides. That's the important factor here, that it's identical on both sides. As you can see, this needs to turn down a little sharper, and this needs to come a little rounder. And we can adjust all this, or we can take the side that we think is the best side and just flip it, and you have an ellipse that's identical on both sides. So now we can do one that's even more exaggerated. These angles get a little more acute, so it's a little more difficult to judge. But we're going to aim for this point here, just slightly. Never erase, I mention this a lot, never erase your mistakes, because they are your map for your correction. This now falls pretty far back on the center line, and here now it gets a little harder to judge. These rear centers, but the fronts are pretty easy. You've got that, and you've got that. And we'll just kind of guess here and guess here. So really what we want to do is now try to do this whole thing with one arc, and try to do this whole And now with one arc. So that's really kind of, and this is in all the books. This is in certainly in Loomis and certainly in all the construction books that the Chinese use for their lower schools. We can come back in and obviously clean these up to make them easier to read. You know, your erasers are a drawing tool. What I'm doing here is creating cleaner lines so that I can see the form that I've drawn. So if a line's too fat, you don't totally erase it and do a lighter line, you just kind of trim it down. So that is our little Ellipse 101. I'm going to come back now and show you how to create all these freehand, but we'll do that in another exercise, because this is what we will be doing most of the time as draftsmen. I just wanted to give you the mechanical basis for it.